Hey, large format photographers. I wanted to just take a few minutes today to share with you a solution I've developed to help me record my large format film exposure, processing, and printing data. I call it FILMbase. It's just a way for me to track all those kinds of details that I need to keep track of regarding my film photography. I, for years, used post-it notes, log books, even recorded audio into my phone regarding these sorts of details, but those solutions really didn't work for me. Just didn't keep everything connected the way I needed to have the data. And so I was happy to find this app called AppSheet. I am not affiliated with AppSheet in any way. It's just a solution that I found that has worked very well. There is a free application instance of AppSheet that you can use as long as you're not reselling the solution. So again, I just want to walk you through how I use it, how I've developed it, and how and why it works for me. The first step in using AppSheet is to basically plan the kinds of data you want to capture when you're working with your film. And so the way I did that was to use Google Sheets. So you do need to have a spreadsheet set up in the background that will contain all of the data that you are about to enter with AppSheet. So, for instance, when you sign into your Google account, you'll use this little grid icon at the top, and you'll sign into Google Sheets. So you'll see that I've already got several sheets set up, but perhaps if you haven't used Google Sheets, you'll be starting with the blank sheet up here to start a new spreadsheet. Again, have several sheets in here, so I'm just going to flip over to the one that I'm currently using with my AppSheet instance. So, for instance, you'll see these column heads. These are the data fields I've set up to capture my large format film. I'm capturing the image, the exposure date, the location, camera that I used, my lens and filter, etc. I'm sure that you'll want to capture your aperture, shutter speed, all those kinds of data fields, and those I've also included as well. Once you have established all of the data that you want to capture and track using your application, and you're ready to build your app, it's as easy as going up here to Tools, and then AppSheet, and then you'll select Create an App. Now, there's a lot of great information that AppSheet has already created in terms of how to use their tool, and you can get to a lot of that by this Learn How to Create Apps selection as well. That will take you over to the AppSheet side, and you can watch tutorials and do a deep dive into some of the areas to get familiar. But the Create an App feature will basically take you into AppSheet and will pick up the data that you created in your spreadsheets and Google Sheets and create data tables that you can configure. So this is AppSheet. This is what a typical instance of AppSheet would look like. And so, for example, we're in the data window, and we're looking at the data tables view, and you'll see that each of the spreadsheets I created a spreadsheet to hold data about my film negatives, and I created a separate sheet to hold information about the prints I make from those film negatives. And those two tables are represented here in AppSheet. And then it's within AppSheet where you can tap into your data table, view columns, and configure to your heart's content the various ways in which the data is rendered and can be entered once you're using the mobile app in the field. For example, this field called camera. If I go into the configuration aspect, you can see that I've pre-configured 3 values for that field, each of the cameras I use. And then I can also choose my input mode. And this instance, I've selected a stack mode, and I'll show you what that looks like inside the app. Once you have all of your data configured and your form fields, your preferences set in terms of how you want to enter your data in the field, you'll go ahead and download the mobile app called AppSheet for your mobile device, and that will sync back to your AppSheet application. So in the field, I will just walk you through a typical workflow that I use using AppSheet. So if I'm on site, typically one of the first things I do is to use an app called Viewfinder, Mark II Viewfinder, which I'm sure might be familiar with to a lot of you. But I use it to create compositions, to understand where the frame lines will be for 5x7, using the lens that I'm using, and also to kind of visualize the scene in black and white. I'm a black and white photographer, so seeing it in black and white really helps. So as I'm on the scene, what I will do, and I usually do this immediately after capturing an image, I will enter that data into the AppSheet database. First form field that I've set up is just a way to uniquely identify each film negative, and I use the date format followed by film format followed by the subject followed by the holder number. So we'll go ahead and enter a piece of data. I shoot 5x7, so that's my format. In this case, my subject is a barn, and my film holder is number 1. This next data field is a way to upload a thumbnail image, which in this case is really nice. When you use the Mark II Viewfinder, it lets you save thumbnail images of your composition. So I'm going to go ahead and upload that thumbnail just as one more way to quickly enable me to identify the negative record in the database. And you'll see that exposure date is automatically captured. So as long as you're entering this data after you make your exposure in the field, that's an automatic date timestamp for you. You can always go back and change that later. So again, the stacked mode for data entry for camera, you see that here, how that's rendered, as opposed to a drop-down menu, which we'll get to just in a moment. So I get to select the camera that I used, I select the lens that I used to make the exposure, and here's an example of a drop-down data entry. If you have a lot of variables that you don't want to clutter up the screen, I would suggest using the drop-down. I use my Kodak Tri-X 320. I rate that at 200. This is the metering notes field is a long form text field that lets me record any amount of information I want about how I metered the shop. So if I happen to have metered this in bulb, I can add that note here. Of course, I can record my aperture and my shutter speed. I have a field called Exposed Notes that allows me to enter any kind of notes about the exposure. And these last 3 fields in this table have to do with processing of the film. And so I won't enter those now. I'll come back and enter those when I process the film. And when I select Save, AppSheet now is writing all of the data that I just entered to my Google Sheets. It does that sort of behind the scenes. So here's the record at the top of the screen. And if I swing over to my Google Sheets, right here, you'll see the last record entered in that spreadsheet is the data that we just entered from that shot. Okay, swing back over to AppSheet. Now let's say that I have come home and I want to process this film. So I'll go into this record. I can select the edit icon. I'll scroll down at the bottom of the record to get to the processing data fields. And the processing date that's just fine. It's automatically entered as today's date. I use Massive Dev, and so all of my film processing profiles are stored there. So this process profile simply allows me to indicate which profile I used, which developer I used, and in this case I used HC110. Process notes is another long-form text field where I can capture any sort of additional data I want about the processing. And save, and now we're again updating that record over on our Google Sheets. Now you'll see at the bottom is an area called Related Prints. Related Prints ties this negative record back to the print table or spreadsheet in Google Sheets. So for instance, if I want to go ahead and make a print using that negative, I select Add, and you'll see that automatically the AppSheet ties this record over to the negative record. So this is a print record, and it's using the reference field tied back to the negative record. We'll leave the print date as today. We're going to select a silver print. I can enter this data about paper, or I can have a set of pre-configured values there in the stacked formation or in a drop down. I have my enlarger lenses set up. All I need to do is select which one I used. I like to capture the enlarger height that it was used to make the enlargement or the contact print. Any sorts of notes I want to capture about the enlarger are here. The aperture I used to make the exposure with the enlarger, and the time. And filter. If I'm doing split grade printing, which I do sometimes, I can add those additional values in print time 2, print filter 2, and print notes just again allows me to capture any other information I haven't already captured in a long form text field. By clicking save, now I'm writing the print record to my Google Sheets database, and you'll see that now I'm back to this negative record, and at the bottom of the negative record we have tagged a print reference, a print record that I can also just go into by clicking here and seeing all of the settings that are related to that silver print that I made. So this is a very simple approach, but it's powerful because it's easy to enter data. And again, AppSheet is a free resource, and of course if you've got a Google account, then just your Google Sheets is there automatically for you. When the data is written to Google Sheets, one nice feature is that it's automatically backed up in the cloud. So when you're out in the field and you want to make some exposures, it's a real easy way to enter all the data and details. So if you have any questions about this solution, feel free to reach out to me. I've got my contact information, link to my contact form in the description of the video. Please do reach out if you have any questions. If you're having any trouble, I'm sure that you'll find some answers in the knowledge base on the AppSheet site, but I am happy to consult with anyone as well. Thanks so much for watching this video, and I hope it works for you.